They say there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who find themselves and those who create themselves. Are you looking for purpose or deciding it for yourself? Will you plunge waiting for someone to catch you? Or will you jump and build your wings on the way down? Seek a path or carve a path. Wait for the future or build it. What is a school but a set of walls waiting for greatness? And who are you but someone destined to achieve it? Here, between the street and the jungle, against time and tide, we push and pull just like the currents. Our ocean of dreams will meet the odds ahead and rise above it all. They say there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who find themselves and those who create themselves. Are you looking for purpose or deciding it for yourself? Will you plunge waiting for someone to catch you? Or will you jump and build your wings on the way down? Seek a path or carve a path. Wait for the future or build it. What is a school but a set of walls waiting for greatness? And who are you but someone destined to achieve it? Here, between the street and the jungle, against time and tide, we push and pull just like the currents. Our ocean of dreams will meet the odds ahead and rise above it all.
Half a day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the AWWA-HIWPS Virtual Microconference. We'll be starting in just a bit. Until then, we ask that you please participate in our short poll. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping rules for today's virtual conference. If you haven't done so already, we ask that you please turn off your video and mute your microphone. This will ensure the quality of today's virtual microconference for all participants. Our conference moderators will also assist you with ensuring your video is turned off and your microphone is muted. To limit interruptions to the conference, if you have any questions for any of our presenters or speakers, we ask that you please share them in the Zoom chat. Your Zoom chat can be found on the Zoom menu bar located on the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, today's virtual microconference will be recorded. Before our conference ends, we will take a group photo via Zoom. At this time, we will ask you all to turn on your videos so we can take the conference photo. We will remind you about this again at the end of the conference. Once again, thank you for joining us for the AWWA-HIWPS Virtual Microconference. Our conference is now starting. Half a day, everyone, and thank you for joining the 2020 AWWA-HIWPS Virtual Microconference. I am Amanda Bloss from the UOG Global Learning and Engagement Office. I wanted to remind everyone that participation in today's virtual microconference is eligible for CEUs or continuing education units through our office. I will be sending out an email to all participants later today for those interested. At this time, it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ken, our current Also, as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please mute your microphones and turn off your videos to ensure the quality of for all of our participants in today's virtual microconference. And now to Mr. Ken.
Thank you, Amanda. And good morning, everybody. And thanks for joining us. Before we jump into this, I also want to thank our planning committee chair, Vanjie, and all the other key members for putting this together. It's been a long time coming. We intended to meet you all and see you all face-to-face earlier this year at our annual conference. Of course, we know why that didn't happen. But we want to thank you again for participating in this conference and seeing how we're going to roll this out into the future. I'll be sort of your MC going through today, our short conference today. Throughout the day, we'll have many other great speakers, much more larger than me. But to kick us off, I'd like to introduce our incoming chairperson, Erin, to give us some opening remarks. So if we can turn it over to Erin.
Thank you, Ken. On behalf of the AWWA Hawaii section, Western Pacific subsection, I'd like to welcome you to our first virtual micro conference. As we know, we live in a time of dynamic challenges and uncertainty. Many conferences for this year have been canceled, including our own, as Ken said. That was scheduled for last April. We had to cancel it. And we missed the opportunity to network, to discuss our work, to visit vendors in person. However, we are adapting, and we're happy to offer this opportunity to learn and to share. Our main presentation today focuses on PFAS. Contamination of our water resources with PFAS is a significant issue facing our industry. Our keynote speaker for our program today is Ryan Thomas from GHD. He's an expert on the subject and will discuss PFAS challenges and considerations. Then the utilities from Chuuk, CNMI, Guam, Palau, and Pohnpei will share in part how the pandemic has affected them, what challenges they have from contaminants, how they address the current drought conditions that's affecting Micronesia, and what innovative techniques they have used. So we hope you enjoy our first virtual micro conference. We're trying to offer our members more benefit using this new platform. And we plan to offer virtual training on regulatory topics, operator training, and office applications in the future. So based on your feedback from our survey, we may have more virtual micro conferences like this. So please complete the survey you will receive via email after the program, and consider becoming a member of AWWA if you are already. So again, thank you for joining, and we hope you enjoy.
Right. All right, thank you, Aaron, for that. So moving on next, we're going to go to a short swearing-in ceremony. Maybe before we do that, I'd like to just do a few housekeeping matters. This is virtual. You should have the ability to chat, as mentioned earlier. If you have any questions that come up or comments for some of our speakers, please type it in the chat area down below, particularly when we start our presentations. As Aaron mentioned, we'll have our key speaker, Ryan, start off the day, and then we'll move to our other key speakers through the islands shortly after that, and then we'll close this conference out. So I want to thank everyone again for joining, and if we can bring Garrett, our officiating swearing in person this morning, and then we'll also bring up our members to be sworn in. Swearing in members would be Aaron, Pete Diaz, Joe Claveria, Nick Manley, and Brian Bearden. So if we can get their mics unmuted for the official swearing in, and we can get going on this. Garrett, are you online and available?
Yep. Good morning, everyone.
Garrett's still unmuted.
Morning.
Okay. I couldn't hear a confirmation of that, but I think we'll go ahead. We're right on schedule to start our swearing in ceremony. So Garrett, if you want to go ahead and get us going, and I'll just ask that Nick, Pete, Joe, Aaron, and Brian, if you just all sort of stand at attention and smile for us, we'll let Garrett take over. Go ahead, Garrett.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Okay, incoming officers, please raise your right hand. Okay, I can see. Okay. Do you accept the office to which you have been elected?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Okay, all right. Do you affirm that you will execute the duties of your elected position as set forth in the bylaws of the Western Pacific subsection of the Hawaii section of the American Water Works Association to the best of your abilities?
I do.
In accordance with the bylaws of the Western Pacific subsection of the Hawaii section of the American Water Works Association, you are hereby confirmed to serve the subsection for the term of the office to which you have been elected. And that's it. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Garrett, and thank you to our new members. We've got a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of excitement too, facing us in the coming year. So moving along in our agenda, I'd like to quickly jump now into our, just make sure. Can everyone see me? Amanda, are you able to see me? I got a different screen here. Well, moving on, if you can hope you'll hear me okay. I'm going to move ahead and go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker. We're very fortunate to have him. It's pretty late in his day, but he was very kind enough to accommodate us. Mr. Ryan Thomas, Associate Scientist with GHD, PhD in Analytical Chemistry from Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan. Terminating degree there. a member of the American Chemical Society, Interstate Technological and Regulatory Council. He's a PFAS leader throughout the nation. I'm not even going to read the number of papers that he's presented on this topic. As a short summary, he's a member of the Innovative Technology Group at GHD based in New York. He's helped develop I'm just going to call it PFAS fact sheets, the technical regulatory guidance for ITRC. He's provided guidance on acceptable and prohibited items in addition to helping to establish GHG PFAS sampling protocols. He's a leader in GHD's North American Emerging Contaminants Work Group and co-leader to ITR's Patent Transport, Physical and Chemical Properties and Site Characterization Subgroup. With ITG, Ryan is leading research and development studies toward emerging contaminants, including PFAS, NDMA removal and destruction technologies. And let me just quickly summarize that, this is an emerging contaminant. I think all of us in the islands are dealing with it. And so I think it's very timely that we have an expert such as Ryan Thomas present to us and bring it into a fashion that I think that we can all learn a lot from. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to you, Ryan, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for that great introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone that's joined the presentation today. I'm currently in Niagara Falls, New York, where the local time is 7:11 p.m. on Thursday evening, and with that, we can get started with the slides. We can move to the next slide. Thank you, appreciate that. So today we'll be focusing on some of the PFAS challenges and considerations. The agenda you see here is including discussion on what PFAS are, and it touches on some of those potential sources. Additionally, we'll discuss the current regulatory landscape and then dive into the sampling, analytical, and treatment challenges. And finally, we'll cover some proactive considerations as they relate to recommended activities addressing PFAS issues. Next slide. So about PFAS. Next slide. What are PFAS and why do we really care about them? So PFAS is the umbrella acronym for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And in terms of this class of compounds, we see that PFAS consists of over 5,000 anthropogenic compounds, meaning not occurring naturally in the environment. And of these 5,000 plus compounds, only about 24 to low 30s of them can be detected by the commercially available analytical methods. And these compounds are comprised of a carbon chain tail end that's hydrophobic or water repelling, and then oleophobic or oil repelling with a head end that's hydrophilic. It's really these multiple properties found in one molecule that gives rise to unique surface active properties leading to partitioning at soil and water and air and water interfaces. So where do PFAS come from, and what do we know about them in terms of health effects? And well, they've been around since the 1940s, and they're found in a wide range of materials and products such as household items and used as part of industrial processes. Mostly we hear about the aqueous film forming foams, or AWWA, have been released at the fire training sites and also at firefighting training events. These PFAS are known to bioaccumulate in the environment and in the human body, thus really linking them to some health problems such as increased risk of cancer, some developmental problems, and also infertility. Next slide. So what we see is that the manufacturing industries such as metal plating, specifically chrome and nickel, some of the fluorinated pesticides, and also the use of AWWF contributes to the overall PFAS observed in the environment. And in fact, many of you may know PFOS, perfluorooctane sulfonate, was used in chrome plating operations as part of the health and safety protocol to suppress hexavalent chromium fumes. And as a result of being used in many of these processes, PFAS are now being found in landfill leachate, at wastewater treatment plants, at the airports, and also firefighting training facilities. Next slide. So this is a PFAS timeline, and it's really full of useful information from the production of PFOA up to where we are now in 2020. I will only focus on a select few here, really starting with 2016 with the US EPA issuing their final drinking water health advisory for PFOA and PFOS at 70 parts per trillion for the single compound and some of the two compounds. In 2019, the EPA announced their plans to deal with PFAS, including proposed regulation. And so far in 2020, we see that there has been some preliminary determinations on trying to regulate PFOA and PFOS. And of course, this was prior to the pandemic, so we will see just how far some of this really progresses. But there has been a lot of movement at the federal and state levels towards regulating these compounds and drinking water sources, as we'll see a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So there is a difference between the per and poly PFAS. And one way to understand that is that we need to actually look at the molecules. And we see per PFAS are fully fluorinated, which means that they have fluorine atoms attached to all bonding sites along that carbon chain, except where the functional group is attached, as shown in this diagram. Carbon-fluorine bonds are very strong and difficult to degrade, and what that result in is the per PFAS being very persistent in the environment. Poly PFAS are not fully fluorinated, which means there's an atom other than fluorine attached to at least one of those carbons on that backbone, and this bond creates more of a weak link in that chain that's more likely to degrade. And it's really because of this poly PFAS that we have the potential to have these polys being transformed into some of the per PFAS. And these differences between molecules affect how they move through the environment. Per PFAS have higher water solubility and low volatility, really allowing them to be transported through the surface and groundwater, while poly PFAS, on the other hand, have a lower solubility and higher volatility, allowing them to migrate through the atmosphere. And since poly PFAS can be transformed into the per PFAS, this is one of the reasons why we see PFOA and PFOS, being found in remote areas from known sources, even though they're neither of them is that volatile. It appears that poly PFAS can travel long distances through the atmosphere to somewhere far from that source. Next slide, please. As most of you know, PFAS have been, rapidly gaining recognition in terms of contaminants of emerging concern. And the initial focus was on the longer chain PFAS, such as PFOA and PFOS. Use of these compounds have since been phased out. In 2016, the EPA issued lifetime health advisories for both PFOA and PFOS at 70 parts per trillion in drinking water. But as you can see from this figure, this is just the really the tip of the PFAS iceberg. Other perfluorinated and polyfluorinated compounds have started and will continue to gain attention. And some of these newer compounds were introduced, as replacement chemicals. For example, Gen X was introduced to replace PFOA. The main point here is that the regulatory trends are branching out to include additional PFAS, as we'll discuss a bit more in the presentation a little later. Next slide, please. And an obvious question could be, why are folks so concerned about PFAS if they've been largely phased out of materials? And it's really the drinking water exposure pathway that's driving that concern. Researchers at Harvard University analyzed EPA's data collected under the Safe Drinking Water Act, UCMR3, that looked at the drinking water supply of communities across the country. And the blue shaded areas there illustrate where PFAS were detected in the water supply. And this really shows that there was a widespread detection of PFAS and concentrations higher in watersheds containing some of the sources and sites that I previously mentioned, such as industrial sites, military fire training areas, AWWF certified airports, and the wastewater treatment plants compared to watersheds without those point sources. Next slide, please. These maps are from that same study and really illustrate where concentrations of PFOS in the top map and PFOA in the bottom map exceeded the EPA's health advisory of 70 parts per trillion. These results revealed that the water of 6 million US residents had PFOS and PFOA greater than that EPA advisory. And it should be recognized that this study is a bit conservative because it focuses on public water supplies serving greater than 10,000 individuals. And what that means is that if you have people on the private wells or obtaining water from a supply serving less than 10,000 people, then they were not accounted for during this study. Next slide. So current regulatory status. Next slide, please. In terms of proactive considerations and really the approaches that we can take when dealing with PFAS issues at some of our sites, it's really important to understand the specific PFAS that we are trying to target and that's being targeted for regulation. So understanding what the individual states and regulatory agencies are looking at is quite important. And as you can see, it's not the same across all states. In this table, there's a lot of variation in advisory levels, and some states have adopted the EPA advisory, while others such as California, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, and others have decided to use more stringent guidelines. And I know, in fact, New York just announced at the end of July their emerging contaminant, maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS at 10 parts per trillion, but also now looking at another emerging contaminant, 1,4-dioxane, at 1 part per billion. Next slide. This slide shows the current surface water guideline levels for PFAS. At this point, only a few have standards for effluents, and of course, there is a lot of variation. But as more attention becomes focused on other media, such as surface water, we believe that more states will begin publishing additional standards as they're becoming more evaluated. Next slide. And really, that same story holds true here for some of the current soil screening levels for groundwater protection as shown in the slide. And notice here that Texas has named many additional PFAS screening levels for soil as compared to some of the other states. And this again just highlights that large variation in PFAS values from state to state. And really, as shown in all of these tables, various organizations have developed health-based values for PFAS substances. And these values were derived from animal toxicology studies related to liver toxicity, reproductive, developmental, in both cases using various animal models. Some of these factors that are being used to calculate risk-based values for soil, groundwater, sediment, and even fish tissues. And again, what this really signals is that although some regulatory agencies are only focusing on a few PFAS, there are many other PFAS that have these risk-based guidance values that may cause need for regulation in the near future. Next slide. In terms of actual occurrences, we're looking at an interactive map from the Environmental Working Group site. This map breaks down the US occurrences at military sites in purple, drinking water in blue, and other known sites in orange. And we do see clusters of occurrences primarily on the east and west coast, as well as in the Midwest, but it is quite scattered all the way throughout. But now, as a caution with using this map and really any other data that you find on the internet, is a good practice to double check or even just fact check with the individual states or agencies regarding those actual concentrations occurrences for specific sites there. Next slide. In terms of PFAS occurrences for Guam, we are looking at a slide from Mallory Duna's presentation for her environmental science graduate thesis proposal at the University of Guam. And this slide shows the specific regions that are found to have PFAS detections from 14 nanograms per liter to a couple of hundred up to 400 nanograms per liter in the groundwater. And I think as part of Mallory's proposal, she's evaluating the contamination source and really interested in understanding seasonal variations from wet and dry seasons. And this research is quite interesting to me, and I look forward to seeing the publications that I know will result from this project. Next slide. Now for sampling and analytical challenges. Next slide. So what we've really been talking about here is that PFAS are ubiquitous, or meaning everywhere, and this can result in some field difficulties in terms of cross-contamination and samples that are not representative of actual site conditions. It is important to have a good quality assurance and quality control, or QA/QC procedures, so that the data that's being collected in the field is actually meaningful and can help inform some remedial approaches. In terms of some of the material that you can use, we really can't use glass bottles to collect these PFAS samples because of apparent loss of the analyte, maybe just sticking to that glass. So we have to use high density polyethylene or polypropylene materials. As I showed in another slide there, that some of the drinking water still had PFAS in it. So if you're going to have a blank, or maybe an equipment blank or a field blank, all of those blanks need to be using certified PFAS-free water. And that's not me saying that it's certified PFAS-free, but actually documentation from a national analytical certified lab. Next slide. Now, this table is really a compilation of the best available PFAS sampling practices from the literature that we have incorporated in our field SOP, standard operating procedures for PFAS sampling. And as you can see, there's specific acceptable items versus prohibited items that need to be addressed when planning any of these sampling events. Some of them include acceptable items on cosmetics used during the sampling events, in addition to the actual equipment that we just discussed that's coming in contact with the sample. Now, when I always present this slide, I always say this is more of a disclaimer, and really noteworthy to mention that the available best practices for PFAS sampling often lacks that research to validate some of the certain equipment or materials ability to impact samples. And I know I've seen research and development studies really just going out and testing some of these commonly used equipment just to see, are they going to leach PFAS into those samples, and how would that really impact your event. But as a rule of thumb, if you have questions about the equipment, it's really best to chat with the manufacturer to gain more insights on the composition of that piece of equipment. Next slide. As for analytical methods, there are a few at this point. US EPA has 2 approved methods, but they are specifically for drinking water. Those methods are 537.1 and method 533. The 537.1 method targets more of the long and some of the short chain PFAS, while 533 is more focused on the short chain PFAS. And also there are some ASTM methods to help analyze for PFAS and other media besides drinking water, to include some of the solid matrices such as soil and sediment, and also some of the more complex matrices in terms of landfill leachate or even wastewater. I know the EPA is working on additional methods for groundwater and surface water matrices at this point, but any of these methods, it's really important to identify the appropriate method for the actual media that you're testing, and also understanding what those detection limits are. On some of these methods, they have maybe 10 nanogram per liter or part per trillion detection limit. But as I just showed on one of the regulatory slides, we are getting down to single nanogram per liter digits. And if you're using a detection limit that's higher than that, then that data will not be as meaningful if you're not using the right method. Next slide, please. So there's an assay, or really a sample prep, by the name of total oxidizable precursor, or TOP assay, that came out of academia. We know that the polyfluorinated compounds can transform to the perfluorinated compounds that I mentioned a little bit earlier. TOP assay oxidizes some of these polys or precursors into those per PFAS using more of an excess of hydroxyl radicals under high temperature. This technique can be useful in understanding additional PFAS risk at the site, and the need to develop innovative treatment approaches. Oftentimes, the question there is, what's my total risk and what is the liability there? And you want to know if there are some of those polys there that are going to be eventually transformed to the per PFAS, especially if you're at a site and you're using an oxidative technique such as in situ chemical oxidation. Next slide, please. So treatment challenges. Next slide. At this point, research on optimal treatment technologies of PFAS in water is ongoing. I think we've seen a bunch of studies that are coming out with different media and empty bag contact time and hydraulic retention times for some of the permeable reactive barriers. A study was completed by the Water Research Foundation in 2016 that really looked at full-scale treatments throughout the US for the attenuation of PFAS. The color coding on this chart here represents the removal efficiencies of the treatment methods, with yellow being a removal efficiency of less than 10%, green being between 10% and 90%, and blue is greater than 90%. And the study looked at really a wide range of treatment methods. As you see across the top, in the first 4 columns, there's aeration, coagulation, dissolved air flotation. There's also coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, and granular, and also microfiltration. Additionally, there's oxidation, aeration, and disinfection, which are all conventional treatment techniques commonly used by some of the industrial facilities and municipal facilities. In terms of the more advanced technologies, including anion exchange and granular activated carbon filtration and nanofiltration, there's also reverse osmosis. And as you see from the results, conventional treatment there really shows that technology has some limited effectiveness on PFAS removal. Granular activated carbon, GAC, or anion exchange, really were more effective removing over 90% of the longer chain PFAS and 10 to 90% of the shorter chain PFAS. We see that nanofiltration and reverse osmosis were the most effective technologies, really able to remove even the smaller PFAS chain included in the study. But overwhelmingly, the nanofiltration and reverse osmosis were more costly than the anion exchange and GAC. And it was recommended as treatment strategies if you're trying to really treat for short chain PFAS present in the water. For longer chain PFAS, we see that anion exchange and GAC were really considered adequate treatment methods. But this study did conclude that all 4 treatments will really need further investigation to determine optimum design parameters for PFAS removal, including consideration for disposal of the reject streams and also resin regeneration where applicable. Next slide, please. There are a number of guidance documents available from Interstate Technology Regulatory Council, or ITRC, and also EPA, which is the one that we're looking at now to offer comparisons between many of the technologies. GAC treatment systems for PFAS have been operating for 15 plus years. Some of the media shows removal capacity for PFOS greater than that of PFOA. The advantage here is that there's no conversion of precursors to terminal PFAS. So none of the polys to the PERS, as I mentioned before. But there are some considerations that we need to take a look at, and specifically if you have high total organic concentrations, as well as co-contaminants that we know can be 10 to 100 times greater than PFAS in terms of concentration, and would really drive the carbon usage and ultimately greater frequency changeouts there. Some of the absorption media can be thermally reactivated to destroy PFAS. In terms of reactivated GAC, we see that it's on the order of 70 cents per pound or lower, really just depending upon what type of quantities you're buying. The virgin GAC is about 50 to 60% higher cost with a 20% better performance in terms of actually being removed. There are a few technical providers at this point. Calgon and AWWA are 2, but there are a few others as well. In terms of resins, there's a dual removal mechanism. We see that the negatively charged PFAS at the pH of typical natural water is part of that. And the hydrophobic and a PFAS can absorb to the hydrophobic surface of the resin. But again, we have to consider co-contaminants, what else is really in that water. And co-contaminants can be an issue with ionic contaminants that are competing for those ion exchange sites. And again, similar to GAC, organics can actually foul the resins, and it's important to understand what type of pre-treatment requirements you would need if you want to use some of these media. We are seeing more full-scale systems coming online, and some technology providers that are there include Purolite and AWWA. And as mentioned in the previous slide, membrane technologies such as RO and nanofiltration are available and have shown to be effective at removing PFAS. The issue that's coming up is, what are we doing with the concentrated reject stream, and that will ultimately need to be managed. Additionally, the disposal will be an issue for all of the PFAS impacted media. There are regeneration options such as thermal for GAC and solvent regeneration with the resin, but those options may not be appropriate if you are using that for a drinking water source. We see incineration is also an option for waste disposal, but there are some issues there too. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that, is incineration the best available technology? And there is limited scientific literature that follows PFAS throughout the process in order to really understand byproducts that are generated specifically for air emissions. We know that fluorinated products are formed as a result of the thermal degradation of PFAS, but the real question that's coming up is that, are we getting to mineralization without any of the air emissions? And at this moment, incineration is considered to be the best demonstrated available technology, but I do think that more research is required to understand the fate of PFAS throughout the process to really make sure that we're not creating a more persistent byproduct, or even, in fact, spreading PFAS back into the environment and for our local communities there. Next slide. And now for a case study, we can move to the next slide, please. So this case study is coming from Michigan, where the initial target parameters focus on phosphorus, iron, and oil and grease. The permanent treatment system design was completed in 2007 with monitoring in 2018 to really define some of the final design details. PFAS were requested for sampling, and the sampling event took place and were actually detected, thus really changing the entire focus of the original design so that we could actually focus on that PFAS treatment. Next slide. So this table shows the groundwater characterization, including PFOA and PFOS levels in terms of their average and max concentrations detected. As we see, PFOS is at a max of 390 nanograms per liter, and PFOA at 38 nanograms per liter. And at this point, the POTW does not have a limit on acceptance of PFAS, but we do expect that to change in the near future. In the state of Michigan, they just released their updated maximum contaminant levels on a number of PFAS at the beginning of August, and we expect for additional limits and advisory levels to follow. The surface water discharge limits at this point are 420 parts per trillion for PFOA and 11 parts per trillion for PFOS. So we really are tasked with treating PFOS. Also of importance of the treatment selection here is that we have around 18 milligram per liter of TOC present in that industrial groundwater. Next slide. So as I always recommend with the numerous vendors and media and just treatment technology approaches, is really to start at the bench scale level to evaluate a number of the technologies in parallel, including granular activated carbon, anion exchange resin, additional absorbents, and another technique that we evaluated was alkaline ozonation, which I'll also mention later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. So for GAC, we see that the breakthrough curves for the column study results in shorter chain PFAS, being from PFBA and PFPEA breaking through before really 1,000 empty bed volumes of water, with PFOS breaking through after 1,500 empty bed volumes. And although we're interested in PFOS, we have to also be mindful of, again, potential future regulations so that we have an understanding of other PFAS that will require some of this treatment. And in this case, if these shorter chain PFAS become regulated, then we know that the media usage estimates will need to be accounted for from PEA, PFBA, and also PFHXA breaking through and driving the change out frequencies of the GAC. Next slide. We also trialed NI exchange, and as we see with these results, PFOS remains non-detect to nearly 8,000 bed volumes. We are still evaluating the study since we are interested in actually seeing breakthrough on that, so we can actually develop cost estimates. We see that PFBA and PFPEA starts breaking through after 3,000 bed volumes. The detection limits were slightly different for some of the influent drums sample compared to the effluent column sampling, resulting in greater than 1 on this curve. But in comparison to the GAC column, it's clear that the resin is more efficient at treating the PFAS in the sample. And this makes sense given that we looked at the initial site characterization data and revealed that total organic carbon was around 18 milligrams per liter. And what's most important here, and with all these technologies, we need to understand selectivity. And granular activated carbon is not selective, meaning that if it sees other organic compounds, they are also going to be absorbed to the surface of that GAC, and meaning that those adsorption sites will be consumed by that organic carbon, resulting in PFAS breaking through sooner, as we see in these studies. Next slide, please. Our client was interested, and still is interested, in evaluating innovative technologies that have that potential to destroy PFAS instead of simply removing PFAS from the water phase to the media and then incineration of that media. Motivated from that, we got into literature, reviewed any identifying promising technologies, and we came across alkaline ozonation. And we performed a bench scale study in our innovative technology group in Niagara Falls, New York, and really to evaluate it, and while monitoring a larger suite of PFAS and destruction products. And our results show 75% to 97% decrease in PFAS, including PFOS, in addition to some of the longer chain, including PFNA, and even one of the shorter chain, PFHXS. And all of these results indicate that the decreases in PFAS concentrations were really due to a combination of removal and destructive mechanisms. Our studies were recently published in the Remediation Journal, and we're moving on with follow-up experiments, including air stripping and identifying lower pH levels. Next slide, please. So in wrapping up with some proactive considerations, we can move to the next slide. The first step we always recommend is to start with more of a desktop evaluation so that we can gain knowledge on the site and look for known or potential sources of PFAS. It's really good to have records of fire events or emergency response that may have been using that aqueous field forming foam or AWWF, and we want to create a response based on these desktop evaluations before really running into the field and performing the sampling. I know that those samples can run from anywhere between $275 to anywhere to $350 USD there for one sample. And additionally, you have to increase your QA/QC. So the whole point there is that we want to evaluate this from a desktop first. Additionally, we want to prioritize sources based on everything that I've mentioned during the presentation, such as understanding potential sources that may be near or adjacent to your site. And again, consider upstream and inputs to your facility or even to the body of water that you are sampling that may be adding a problem that's not intrinsic of that actual site. And again, if you do need to sample, the whole point there is we want to be strategic. Consider some best management practices to reduce or reuse any wastewater. Consider source control to focus in or reduce any commingled flows with PFAS impacts. What we've been seeing, and I'm sure many others will see as well, is that be prepared for reopeners. If how you have a closed site that never considered PFAS or other emerging contaminants such as 1,4-dioxane, we see that these sampling requests from regulatory agencies are requiring folks to go out and actually collect those samples, or in fact, the agency will do it themselves. But there's also a community engagement piece here in terms of responding to the community and employee concerns that may have to deal with being around impacted samples. We need to remember that when people are emotional about PFAS, technical evidence really does not resonate very well. People generally do not trust the information if they're upset and worried. So that personal interaction based on all of these principles is quite critical. Next slide, please. So some recommended activities, include understanding that a regulatory exceedance versus an actual risk. Understand site management options in terms of remediation or risk management motivated by, of course, your sensitive receptors, such as a drinking water supply. As I've mentioned throughout the talk, PFAS are ubiquitous, so having a sense of background concentrations near the site is quite helpful in terms of having just a level to compare against. Developing a site-specific conceptual site model helps to identify those receptors, any pathways, or even emission points. And I think that all these considerations will ultimately help to effectively manage risk on PFAS and any other emerging contaminant sites. Next slide. And with that, I'll leave you with my contact info there, my email, and we'll turn it back over to the moderator for any questions.
All right. Ryan, thank you so much. I think everyone's clapping right now, so very good. So we're right on schedule. We have some time, and I'd like to open it up for some questions. We've got a few questions that I'll get into. There's still some time, so if you have some questions that are burning, please type them into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. So the first question that kicked us off was from one of our very own members here. It's a kind of a specific question, is on the disposal of GAC. I guess there's municipalities that use GAC as a treatment mechanism. What kind of experience or guidance or thoughts do you have on the disposal of the GAC media?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. And that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot in the States too, is that, what do you do with this PFAS impacted media, be it GAC, be it any of the other adsorptive media, including, ion exchange or some of the carbon organoclay-based material. And, typically the rule of thumb there is that go into incineration so that we can actually, destroy that carbon fluorine bond. But I know there is some regulation that's passing through the House and Senate now that's in fact trying to, ban incineration on particularly AWWF impacted material, but also potentially some of this GAC. So again, what do you do with it? Another thought would be to go for a landfilling. But the ideal there is that some landfills at this point are a bit weary of accepting these materials because at this point they are a target for PFAS and being in their leachate. So it is a tricky question. I think that either landfilling or incineration, but that's at this point, and that could change just depending on where the regulations really start to go.
All right. Banji, if that didn't answer your question, go ahead and type away. Another question that came in, Senator Sabrina Paris, was, can you give us any guidance or your experience on when you think a national MCL might be established, or any discussions or experience you have on that?
Yeah, great question. And this comes up in discussions in ITRC all the time. And I think what we're seeing is that process is going to be a bit lengthy. I know that they were trying to have regulatory determinations within, a year or two from their initial PFAS action plan that was unveiled in February of 2019. But I think that's why we are beginning to see the states move ahead with determining and establishing their own MCLs instead of waiting for US EPA. But I think we're still at least 2 or 3 years out for actually seeing a national MCL, but the states really are not waiting until then.
Right. Let me put this out there. Those of you who have questions, if you would like us to unmute you and open you up for a little more face-to-face Q&A, I think we have a little time. We can do that. Just message us and we can go ahead and do that. With that said, we have another question from Mr. Rick Zimmer, and his question is a little technical for me to go through, and I don't want to butcher it. So if Rick, if you don't mind, can we unmute you and go ahead and let you ask your question specifically to Ryan?
Yes, Ryan, I was just going to ask about the application of the top assay and the TOF method also that EPA is looking at, total organic fluorine, and the applicability of those two methods as it relates to a strategy for PFAS assessment.
Yeah, great question. And it's really great to see, more of these technologies coming online. We know that using liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, that tandem MS there is one of the main tools that's available to us in terms of analytical capabilities, and turnaround times can be anywhere between 10 to 14 days. So seeing something like a TOF come on board to give us more of an insight as to what type of strategies we can implement at the site is important. My experience with TOF was through one of the case studies that I showed there. The data I did not show is that throughout that alkaline ozonation procedure, we were monitoring, what's happening to the PFAS. Are we creating some in terms of shorter chains popping up as a degradation of a longer chain, or what are we doing? Are we generating fluoride ions, which would be a destruction byproduct? So I think TOF combined with fluoride ions can really help you see, are you passively removing PFAS, or are you actually getting some sort of degradation as a result of an actual PFAS destruction process? I know that some of the labs are bringing that on, but we worked with our academic partner on the East Coast, Clarkson University, to provide those data. Also with top assay, like I mentioned before, I think that that's fantastic for understanding some of the poly PFAS that may be there on the site. And as we may all know, there's a struggle with having availability of pure standards. So what that means is that for the analytical lab to actually quantitate and get you a real number for some of these PFAS, they have to have that standard. So 5,000 plus PFAS, we don't have standards for all of those. So that's where we need to do some non-targeted analysis and also look at some of the total fluorine methods. Excellent question.
Rick, you had a follow-up question as well. Was that picked up in your follow-up question?
Yeah, I just combined both into a single question. I think Ryan addressed it.
Great. Thank you. We have another question here, a short question from Guam EPA. Question asked, what will be the required or suggested frequency for sampling?
Right. Yeah, and I think that when we look at the sampling, this can really go into more of your routine monitoring. If there is identification of PFAS at the site, I think that question is trying to get at, well, what's the stability of PFAS? And it's hard to say in terms of migration and fate and transport, what happens there, just depending on if there's some sort of migration off the site. But if those things are accounted for, I think that routine monitoring quarterly would be an option. I know we've done that on some of our sites in the States, and the concentrations are not deviating plus or minus 5–10%. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Ryan. I've got another question, and maybe I'll let is it Ian? If you want, do you want me to go ahead and read your question out, or would you like to maybe answer it or ask it directly? It's kind of technical and specific, so again, I don't want to butcher it for you. Can we unmute Ian?
Yeah, this is Anna. I was just wondering about the alkaline ozonation and what happens to the PFAS, or maybe specifically PFOA and PFAS products, because you mentioned you were looking for a method that would result in destruction of the compounds.
Right, right. So yeah, so that paper that we pulled, you know, those protocols from came from a 2012 publication, and our thought there was that we wanted to actually test it to see, are we getting destruction or is it through some sort of passive removal? And you know, we went through a host of treatments in terms of, you know, peroxide concentrations that we were using, ozonation times, as well as, you know, our base. We went to a pH of 11 there over a period of time. And what we see is that, you know, there's a physical component there in terms of removal, but also some destruction. And, you know, the main thing we would want to focus on is trying to close the mass balance and understand if all the PFAS are accounted for. And in that case, we do not see that. And that's what's motivating those follow-up studies that I mentioned, which is part of the air stripping and understanding really pKa values of some of the PFAS that are extremely low. So thought there is to go to lower pH and perform the technique, but also capturing the air above the actual sparging sample. And we're doing that in tandem with our lab partners to try to understand those impacts. So at this point, we cannot say 100% that we're getting destruction, but we do see some byproducts being formed, such as fluoride ions and also some of the organic acids. But excellent question. I didn't go very in detail into that study, but it is alluded in the paper of that remediation journal. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thanks again. So we've got a few more questions here, Ryan, if we have a little more time, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
It's late there. We appreciate it.
No, I'll be here the whole time, so go for it.
Your screen behind you, it's deceiving. I know it's nighttime there and late.
That's fine.
So a few more questions. Another follow-up question. Senator Harris, if you like, we can unmute you. Maybe you can ask your question specifically. Can we unmute Senator Harris?
Happy day, Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Thank you for your presentation. I just was thinking, brainstorming. So you were talking about incineration, one of the go-tos for breaking down PFAS. What about catalytic degradation in regards to like enzymatic degradation? Is there technologies available to do that? You know, where does it require?
Great question. Yeah, no, there are a number of technologies that are being trialed, and they're going from either, you know, the bench scale level and even to pilot scale level. That I've seen some enzymatic, I've seen biodegradation. Most of them at this point are at the lab scale and still trying to you know, understand efficiencies and what else is being created there in that degradation project or product there. But yes, to your point, there are a number of you know, technologies that are being trialed, and I always recommend ITRC's remediation subgroup, where they have put together a table of all of the various treatment trials that are being you know, facilitated at this time. But yes, excellent point. There are a number of things going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Ryan, great. Guys, ladies, we have a few more minutes. If you want to type your questions in, we can try to squeeze in a few more, but we got two small ones here, one maybe not so small. Can you speak briefly, Ryan, about PFAS and wastewater?
Yes, so I mean, I think what we're seeing in terms of PFAS in any media is that it is there in low levels in terms of background concentrations. But in wastewater, just depending on where you're sampling, we do see anywhere between hundreds parts per trillion of some of the main ones that are looking to be regulated there. I think for wastewater specifically, if we're thinking about you know, treatment of that, as I mentioned in the presentation, trying to understand, you know, effective pre-treatments there that would, you know, remove some of the TOC or total organic carbon that would ultimately drive you know, some of the media usage that would be used for a wastewater is important. But to that point, there are a number of absorptive technologies that are claiming to be able to have an absorption capacity even in the midst of high TOC or other contaminants that are there, just in terms of that selectivity. So in short, we do see it there, and having a focused approach and trying to figure out treatment technologies is important for effective removal.
Great, great. So we got a few more questions coming in. Here, have the impacts of the next generation PFAS been determined?
Impacts in terms of health impacts, I'm thinking, or more of an environmental. Oh, I can go on both. Oh, health. Okay,
I guess health was the specific one, but you can hit on both.
Okay, yeah, I think I see it, health there. No, and I think to that point, I know there were a number of studies that were set to take off in terms of understanding health effects of folks who have been exposed or in neighborhoods that would have had high exposure rates. And I think at this point, there are still a lot of research gaps and trying to understand, what those actual one-to-one correlations are. But those type of studies are in the works and are being done at the national level, and even some of the state agencies are beginning to, invoke their own blood testing and studies of that nature to figure out what's in the blood and what also are those impacts in terms of, developmental issues or any other health issue. And that's for the traditional PFAS. For the newer generation, I don't think they've gotten that far yet.
Guys, this is great. Thank you so much for your questions. We're running up now, and I'd like to keep us on schedule. I've got one more question I'd like to squeeze in. I'm just going to read it here. It's in the chat. You can see it, I'm sure. I guess for the biggest issues in wastewater PFAS is how much it concentrates in the sludge and what do you do with that sludge, and how bio and wastewater transforms PFAS from the effluent to the effluent. So any suggestions or thoughts on this?
Yeah, and that's another question, because folks that would have that sludge or even biosolids to a certain extent have typically used that in agricultural settings. And the question now is that, okay, you have this concentrated biosolid or sludge that we're land applying that could be near a sensitive receptor and migrating to a drinking water source. I think the ideal there is that we'll have to evaluate the biosludge and understand what type of concentrations are there, and if there is a way that we would want to stabilize PFAS in that material to prevent that leaching capability, if it is ultimately land applied. But I know we see that in the states such as Wisconsin, Maine, New Hampshire, where biosolids were used in that land applying mechanism. That's a great question and an issue that I think is still being resolved.
Yeah, I think we can tell. I think the questions are starting to come in more specific on wastewater, but I'd like to keep us on schedule. So here's what I propose. There's another question. I'm sure others have questions in their mind as well. If you can maybe stick around, stay on. We have a lot of cool other presenters coming up. And as the questions come in, maybe if you want to just chime in on the chat, or I'm sure your email or your point of contact is there. I want to thank GHD. I want to thank Aaron for reaching out to you, and I want to thank you, Ryan, for taking your time and putting this presentation together. It's clearly a hot topic. It's on the states, it sounds like, to set our own standards, take care of what we have to take care of, while the national side starts to pull together regulations and guidance, which sounds like it's a few years out still. So, Ryan, any last parting remarks before we close this out?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody for their opportunity to come and present and the great Q&A that we're having. And I look forward to continue answering questions, and feel free to reach out to my email and we can continue that discussion as well. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks.
Okay, everyone. I want to just kind of put a milestone. During Brian's presentation, we hit 100 participants, which is great. We're exceeding what we set out. We're down to 99. I think someone may have gone to the bathroom, maybe, I don't know, but we try to keep it up there at 100. So let's move on. We'd like to do we want to reach out to our neighbors in the islands up in the CNMI, FSM, Palau, and everywhere else, to give them an opportunity to update us on the challenges they're seeing, they're having. And we're very fortunate that many of the islands reached back and we're happy to participate. So we're going to move into that part of our agenda now, just to keep things so we don't, in line. It's all in alphabetical order. I think everyone's queued up. So with that, I'd like to move over to our neighbors over in Chuk. I'd like to introduce Kepomita. He's the CEO of their water and power and wastewater system out there. So he's got a lot on his shoulders there, and there he is. So Kempo and Eric, thanks so much for joining us. And we got a little short snippet here, and then we'll turn it over to you. So Amanda, if you can.
Good morning, Ken. Can you hear us? Can you see us?
We can hear you and we can see you.
Thank you. Ken, how many minutes do we have? Sorry, I don't want us to go over the time.
Kempo, you have about 15 minutes. So 10 to 15 minutes, and if there's a little room, we can maybe squeeze in some Q&A.
Okay, I think I'll need 5 minutes. So thank you, Ken. We appreciate this opportunity to join. We're the first to go, so we're kind of the guinea pigs here. It's first time to join the AWWA meeting. I note that 2 days ago, we just had our PWWA CEO forum. So we had a good call there with PWWA. I did bring up that we were going to join this call and ask them if there's any chance for collaboration, but I'll contact you, Ken, on that on another time. So over the next few minutes, I wanted to just briefly talk about CHUP, just in general, CPUC, our new water and sanitation projects, and then how COVID-19 has affected us. So again, my name's Kembo Mira, I'm the CEO. To my right is Eric Paul, he's the head of water and sanitation. I've been the CEO for 2.5 years, as well as Eric. He just joined when I joined. I was an attorney for 12 years before joining CPUC. So just some general information about CHUP, just in case some of you don't know. Our population is about 100,000. Last consensus, there is 49,000 people who live in CHUP, which means most of us are abroad, probably many of us in Guam. I hope we're not causing too much trouble there, but helping you folks in Guam. This island is the only island that has power, water, and sewer, where we have the airport. Our population on this island is 14,000. And there's 2,000 households on the island. Only 7% of our total population in CHUP has access to water, 7%. On this island, 20% of the households have water, 20%. Our distribution, our pipe network is 40 kilometers. 70% is asbestos pipes. We don't use any of the asbestos pipes anymore. It's too much leaking. Most of the island, this island doesn't have access to water. We have 483 water connections. 83 are commercial, rest is residential. We have 510 sewer connections, 54 commercial. We generate about 20 million gallons a month. We lose 50%. Our non-revenue water is 50%. We end up only billing 20% for commercial, 17% for residential. 95% of our water comes from deep well. So we're pumping basically 24/7. We do chlorinate our water. We check for chlorination weekly. We try to keep the level that is required. See, we do have a new ADB, Asian Development Bank grant for $20 million to update our sanitation and also to do a new water system. putting in main pipes, laterals, and also rehabilitating 5 water tanks. 3 of our water tanks is 2 million gallons. Two of them are 1 million. So we have a huge project ongoing. We got the grant this year. I think out of 20 million, 14 million will be used for construction materials. The other 6 million is capacity building and feasibility studies and other things like that. We also have a grant for 1.8 million from the Japan government. We're currently upgrading all of our deep wells. So we got about 22 million in grants for water and sanitation. We also have 10 million from World Bank to do a solar farm on this island, and also to put power on 2 other islands, one in the lagoon and one outside of the lagoon. 2016 to 2020, we did suffer 3 droughts. It's been very dry here the past 3 years since I've moved back. That's pushed our deep wells, in the peak, our deep wells are having issues with pumping, and we're really afraid that if the droughts continue and we can't pump water anymore and the rain stops, we're really going to be in deep trouble. So we're hoping that with the new water project, we can start getting a lot of our water source from the mountains into the tanks, chlorinating them and using gravity to pressurize our system. We're also spending a lot of money pumping. As I said, all of our water basically comes from deep well. Last thing is, how has COVID-19 affected our water and sanitation? In January, between January and June, our water sales have dropped 20%. Hotels are closed since early March. We have 5 hotels here, and so that's contributed to the water drop. How we bill customers, 50% of the water bill for commercial is charged to sewer, and 15% of your water bill for residential is charged to sewer. I don't have the exact numbers. I think for residential, the first 4,000 gallons is $7. And I don't know after that. We don't have our billing department here. So anyway, that's just a brief overview of CPUC, Ken. I wasn't sure exactly what we needed to talk about, but that's what we have from CHUK. So while the COVID is affecting us, we're very fortunate to have about $22 million to do a water and sanitation project. We're also very happy that we get to use you, Ken, and DCA. We've used DCA since last year, or maybe over a year ago, 2 years now. Bringing you folks down to help us out has been a really big help. I've told PWWA that we're looking more to AWWA because Guam is an hour from us. South Pacific is, I think they have a different setup than do we, this side. So I think we'll be leaning more towards AWWA because we have more in common. That's all we have, Ken. Thank you.
Kimpo, Eric, thank you so much. Let me just say that I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know there's a lot going on. I was very fortunate to visit you all last year. I hope to see you again. I'd also like to state, our subsection here was intended just for exactly what you shared with us, Kimpo, and what I'm sure we're going to hear from our other islands, is that we have a lot in common. You listed out your system. That sounds very much like our system here on Guam and the system up in CNMI. Our systems are very similar. They were built back in the trust territory times, asbestos, steel tanks, leaky pipes, layers upon layers of challenges. So it's very important, and we do appreciate you chiming in and sharing some lessons learned, and we can all band together and empower each other with knowledge. So it was right on mark. Thank you so much for that. We have a few minutes here. If anyone wants to type in a comment or a question for Kimpo and Eric. We got one from Pete. Does CPUC have any plans on addressing the high unaccounted water rate? Can you speak to your water loss and trying to address that, folks?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Before answering the question, I also wanted to, I think Miguel's on the call, Wanted to thank Miguel for helping CPUC, also introducing people in Guam that has helped CPUC. It's really made a big difference for us. In terms of the non-revenue water, the 50%, we have some experts under the ADB grant that's supposed to help us. Unfortunately, with the ban, travel ban, people can't come in. We also have a tariff study that is ongoing. Our power subsidizes our water and our sanitation. But in terms of dealing with it, we don't really know whether our high water loss is from stealing or leaks. We have a new paved area that was done by Compact, and new pipes were installed. I think the big problem is we don't have enough flow meters in different zones. I've been to many oversight hearings at the Senate, and they ask, why is the non-revenue so high? Some experts have come here and said, oh, it's illegal connection. The people are stealing water. But I said, where's the proof? I don't want to go and start saying everyone's stealing water when our new system under the new paved road could be leaking. So I think we need to put in some more flow meters, pressure loggers. I think Ken has tried to help us with this issue as well, but we haven't put in some of the hardware that we need. We haven't created zones. We just lack the capacity to do that. I wish when we first started 2.5 years ago, actually non-revenue water was high 70%, high 70%, because the water was being given to the entire island. So when I became CEO, I cut off the water from anyone who lived outside of the new paved road with the new pipes. We basically just dug a hole and we put concrete blocks in the pipe because we knew about all of the leaks on the old paved road. And we were getting hammered. And the senators who were living on those old paved roads calling me in saying, you can't do this, you can't disconnect the water. I said, the leaks are too big. And our commercial area is on the new paved road. We couldn't supply hotels, hospital, government building. We just couldn't supply the water. It was too much leaks. So once we capped off the old roads, we dropped our non-revenue water to 50% from mid 70s. So we knew that at least 25% of the water was leaking in the old asbestos pipes. So now the bigger question we're dealing with now is, what is the problem on the new paved road with the new pipes? Is it leaks underneath? And our new paved road is, how deep is it? 4 feet? Almost 5 feet of slab. The new pave, it's concrete. Concrete? I'm not sure what's going to happen if we find out that it's leaking underground. Good luck digging through 5 feet of slab. So to answer the question, yes, it's a big problem we're trying to work out. I think we know what we need to do. We just haven't yet ordered the hardware. We did do a test with pressure loggers, and we showed that at night, the pressure did go up and held steady. And in the morning, when people got up, it fluctuates throughout the day. So I think initially, with the pressure loggers results, we thought that the new paved road doesn't have any issues in terms of leaks. But that study was done for, I think, several weeks, maybe a month. So that's why we assume that maybe it's illegal connections. But it's very difficult here to go into people's property who are cheating. You get machetes. They come out to fight you. You got to deal with dogs. Our workers just recently got bitten so badly, you had to go to the hospital. And so it's hard to go onto people's property. And then there's massive, people do their own connections. We don't have plumbers here. As you know, Ken, people don't connect pipes correctly. So when our pressure goes up too high, those pipes burst. And as we know, when people are cheating, they don't give a darn about their water. Their tanks are overflowing with water and they keep them on. So I'll end there, Ken, I think.
That was good. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. I think you hit a lot of the sentiments that a lot of other water purveyors in our region have. Let me, we're kind of short, but I want to squeeze in 2 quick questions, Gimpo, but before we move on here and go to the CNMI. Can you briefly talk about what if anything's being done about providing hand washing water to those who don't have water, if anything? And then if you can, I don't know if there's time, but can you squeeze in a little discussion on the makeup of your water wells? Are they in volcanic or limestone? I think they're in volcanic. Maybe the quick, I think you talked about the numbers, but the depths of them, and just sort of the operations of your wells. We're kind of short on time, but if you can squeeze that in for us. Again, what are you doing about COVID and hand washing, and a little bit on your water wells? Can you squeeze that in for us, please?
Okay, Ken. Yeah, I'll be real quick here. So for washing hands, there's really nothing done. We have signs all over the place saying wash your hands, and they're really pushing the washing the hands. But during the drought, when we had to turn off the deep wells, so there are times we turned off the deep wells at night, so nobody got water, because we were afraid that the deep wells would just stop pumping. So this is something we've talked to the leadership about. Look, if we have a drought, we have no water, how are we going to wash our hands? Most people don't have access to bathrooms here. So we're afraid if we ever got COVID, it's gonna really do damage here. Now, in terms of the deep well, it's not limestone. We don't have the same setup like WAM. So it's the other one that you mentioned. For the deep wells, they go 110 to 30 feet.
Great.
Shallow.
Hey guys, again, thanks for joining. There's a few more questions that are being showed up, and if you don't mind, can you guys stay online, enjoy the rest of the other presentations?
No
but
problem.
If you can maybe type your answers in, there's a lot of interest, and I think we got a lot of common ground. So stick online. I think this was a great discussion. I'd like to quickly move on now to Q. Everyone's going to have enough time. Don't worry. We've got plenty of time here, so no one's going to get cut short. But if I can move over to Bill Gilmore up in the CNMI. So Bill, if we can cue you on, we have a little short snippet of a presentation, and then we'll turn it over to you. So Bill, if you can be on standby there. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you good.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm William Gilmore, the Deputy Executive Director here at the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation, representing 3 islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. And and I'm also representing our Executive Director, Gary Camacho, who lets me stand in for this. So this is a great opportunity to show my stuff. So next slide, please. The agenda for today's presentation is brief, but a little long. I apologize for that. But I want to make sure that everybody understands that the CUC is a multi-departmental service agency providing power, water, and sewer to those 3 islands. And we have the full responsibility for those. And we're independent and self-funded, so that can be a challenge in itself, but it's the way we have to operate. It is I will be focused mostly on water today, and so any other questions about our wastewater systems, you can always ask later. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. And since we're focused on water services, I'll start with Tinian and Rota, who are similar in size. They rely on a single water source to supply their needs for the entire island. They also have comparable size systems. They rely on minimal tanks to support because gravity seems to be the benefit for them. And they also have excellent water, which is something that Saipan is a little bit jealous about. And also their systems are in a little bit better shape conditionally, but again, everything has to be improved. We know that Tinian needs an additional PRV to help handle some of the pressures for some of their high hill areas. But moving over to Saipan, there are 8 times the number of customers that we have to deal with, and it's a whole different situation. We are relying on 139 wells, of which 24 are out of service. And so we draw from 13 aquifers that are relatively shallow, 300 feet on average, a little more, a little less. And we use 15 storage tanks across the island at different altitudes, 1 million gallons down to 500,000 in the size. And also that allows us to sustain the hydraulic pressures across the island and share supply. And also with the numbers of PRVs that we've been adding and air relief valves, we've been able to make sure that our average PSI is around 46 to 52 on a daily basis. Let's see, but our potable water is what we have. But again, the challenge for us is the quality of the water. Most people don't like the taste because it has a high chloride value in it. And so that is a challenge for us. We have not proceeded with desal. Only our resorts have done that themselves, but we're looking towards that in the future. And just to give you a sense about the condition of the facilities themselves, the infrastructure, we also have the same challenges that Chuk just mentioned, the old asbestos concrete pipe and things like that. So that is a real challenge for us. Next slide, please. But let's move into the COVID impact. At the very beginning, the governor asked the executive director to be a member of his task force for the CNMI, and that's been valuable because it keeps us up to date on a regular basis. But he also saw that there would be value to have a COVID-19 task force internally, but within the utility itself, because as you know, the only way that we're going to handle both our loss in tourism that we've had and also our loss in revenue that comes with it, we have to make sure that we can control spending, control our human resources, and also monitor our finances on a regular and ongoing basis. Next slide, please. The impact, the immediate thing that we had to do is when the governor sent out a letter in March, he asked for an immediate reduction in staffing so that everybody could be protected and go home. So we fell to an essential staffing level, and we took that first week following that order to evaluate just what we really needed to do over the next several months that we were going to be under this control, tight control. And so we looked at the protocols in terms of, could you go back one slide? I wasn't finished with that one. Thank you. We had looked at procuring the sanitizers, masks, and establishing the social distancing rules, but we also established decisions regarding our spending. And so we focused on how to reduce spending and also how to prioritize spending so that we could downsize requisition sizes and also spread the expenditure limits over a longer period of time, because we are in a tight fiscal condition as we speak. So at the same time, we also were sensitive to the customers. We wanted to make sure that they could also handle the loss of some people when they were sent home weren't paid. And so they had to spread their costs out over time. So we gave them additional time to avoid being disconnected so that they could spread their payments as they could over that 3-month period. And it's also at the same time during this several months, we transitioned the water staff to a 7-day per week effort so that one group of staff was on this week, then they transitioned to a whole new staff the following week. And we kept doing that over and over, and it allowed us to improve our level of coverage because we had to withdraw overtime and we had to rely heavily on flex time to rely on getting everything done that we needed. It did delay some repair activities. We were able to proceed with some. We had to give up our water audit effort because we just didn't have the staff at the time. We deferred some PRV installations, and as you can assume, the backlog in work orders did grow, And we also had to defer some major equipment purchases that shifted everything into a more of a rental mode as opposed to owning our own. Next slide, please. And so following that 2-month period, right about May, the staff were all called back by the governor. Says, okay, everybody can be redeployed. And so we did, and we pulled everyone back. And but we did not rehire, even though we had some 26 vacancies. But we did have new rules about meeting sizes, about the requirement that you had to wear a mask at all times, and that we were going to be establishing, and we have, infrared testing of everyone as they come into the office or their work site every day, and we track that. We also took the time to, as you know, every budget has a list of contracts that you rely on every year to provide certain services. Well, we targeted those for savings opportunities. Again, we are in a very tight fiscal condition. And so we eliminated our security services, shifted that to ourselves, government supplied cell phones, and also our vehicle tracking system. And since we were having trouble with a couple of our larger vendors not making payments, that was also putting a major pressure on to our cash flow problems. And so again, more effort on our part to control spending. And so, but with the staff coming back full time, we were able to shift and focus now back on work order reduction, getting the new customer service connections started again, because that represented revenue opportunities. And we also were able to prioritize and focus more on getting our larger leaks done first. And as always, we're always in typhoon preparation mode. Next slide, please. But there were 2 efforts that the Governor's Task Force asked us to assist in. One was the Marianas Resort, because they wanted to be able to establish that resort, which had been closed for about a year, as an isolation ward. And so several things had to get done to get the resort back online. Essentially a new water line about 500 feet. We also had to put in a new power line to the RO system since it wasn't tied to the underground system. And with that connection, we were able to reopen the RO, deep well, for water supply by installing a whole new pump and motor. The casement was fixed in several areas, and also we flushed and disinfected the system. And we also had to fix the lift station, the sewer lift station, because it only had 1 pump, which we had to fix and maintain. We also added a new lag pump so that there was plenty of capacity, so that there were no problems at all. And finally, the electrical room was sort of like a very wet, corrosive systems had been allowed to happen. A lot of the dials weren't working, so we had to do a lot of work to get that back into a safe condition as well. And that has been done, and it is now ready to operate. Next slide, please. We also were asked to assist the hospital in establishing an outdoor testing facility and parking lot. So essentially, as you can see, those systems would rely on water and sewer lines. So if you see that the picture on the left, it shows we just sort of laid a water line to those 2 white buildings that you see in the center picture. And we also extended a lift station by installing a septic tank below the facilities with a discharge pipe that pumped up to an existing manhole. That way we were able to minimize cost, minimize work, and get it done fairly quickly. And it's also a temporary solution, so we'll be able to remove it fairly easily. And also, as always, we also provided power to that system as well. Next slide, please. The biggest hurdle, though, for COVID-19 for us has always been, and it will continue to be for the next several months, is financing. We are extremely tight condition. We probably cut our revenue stream in half or maybe 40%. And so that has been a real challenge for us. And so the number 1 primary goal that has been for all of us, for all 3 divisions, essentially is to sustain the 80-hour work week for all staff, because we know that we are the safety net for the entire island as well as the other 2 islands. And we are the economic backbone for the tourist industry that helps the CNMI survive. But with no tourists coming in and probably several more, we had to rely on something to protect ourselves. So we had to work around our own HR, our human resources rules, because it only provided for layoffs. Well, you can't operate a utility without staff. So we worked with the board and they agreed to allow for an austerity option, which allows you to identify a target amount of money, and then you can reduce the number of hours accordingly to match that targeted savings. This was voluntarily based. It had to be, the board run it that way, and we chose to do it that way. And we were able to get 95% of the staff to agree. However, at this time, it has yet to be implemented, which is a good thing. Next slide, please. So moving on then to what also is happening around here is the impact of PFOA and the PFOS. The area for us that has been that we know of is International Airport and Comerville well fields. We learned of our problem back in 2015, and with the support of BCQ and our own conversations, we agreed to shut down the highest contaminated wells in 2016, 8 of them. And then there were an additional 2 wells directed by the federal court in February of 2020. We are currently testing 3 locations that are fed from the airport well fields. One is under federal monitor, and that is the Astrolahi tank. And the other 2 locations are monitor only for now. Next slide, please. Here is the map of the well fields around the International Airport and also Comerville. You can see the blue or black outline around the airport. That's primarily the Isley and Oakjohn wells. And then if you go off to the northwest of the slide, you can see the blue dots, and there are an additional 7 wells or so, 9 wells, pardon me, down in Comerville that are also affected by PFOS. But all those wells pump back up to the Isley water tank. And so we're looking for a solution to handle that as well. You can see on the map on the right the location of the island where it is. However, just so you know, the Tinian and Rhoda presently have not been identified as having a problem as yet. They have not been tested, but the distances of the airports from any population centers and also our water supply over there doesn't make it look like it's a viable problem at the present time. Next slide, please. And so we, as you know, we have to make sure that our customers are fully informed about what the impact it is on them. And so we have taken the time to be very diligent in terms of explaining the problem of PFOA, PFOS, as well as putting articles in the paper, publishing maps, sticking them on grocery store doors, and also showing the area of influence. As you can see, the tan or gray area there shows where the current water supply is being provided that contains that federal monitored level tank water, the Astrolahi tank and the Canatabla tank. And so we're monitoring and provided updates on an every other month basis on these maps. Next slide, please. And so the only solution for us was a full solution. And so we want to make sure that we remove it all. And based off of Mr. Thomas's presentation, I'm glad that we are in sync. We did evaluate reverse osmosis and granular activated carbon. We also looked at, and we found out that the RO is just too expensive for us at the present time. The pilot study that was done by someone else found that resin for a high chloride water supply and also with high hardness would not work well in terms of refreshing or rejuvenating the water or the resin, the GAC material, pardon me. So we chose dry carbon, and that will be coming from Calgon Carbon. They do provide a rejuvenation system so that as we saturate the GAC material, we can send it back, they can rejuvenate it, and we can get it back. So hopefully we can save a little money on procurements down the road. But the water sample that we sent in, the Calgon, was able to determine that we would require a duplex unit, as you see here on the right, that can handle a 50 gallon per minute standard well size. That is the largest well that we have on our well systems, just because of that we're not too deep and the lens layer is not too deep as well. So we have to limit the amount of pull. And so that's why that size is optimum for us. And the tanks, the way they work, they operate sequentially. It goes in one tank and then follows through to the other. Again, I think it looks going to be an effective system for us. Next slide, please. Now, the funding has been the biggest challenge for us because, again, CUC is not a large revenue producer in terms of capital funding. And so we've had to rely on grant funding to support these project efforts. So we initiated an EDA grant back in 2017. And as of this month, we're hopefully going to be receiving the funds that we requested back then for our first original solution. But as you can imagine, over time, things have changed. The plume has expanded, and so we're affecting more wells, and also the original solution is just basically inadequate to meet any kind of a solution. So what we were planning on doing first, we were going to focus on one choke point at our feeder booster station 1 that would capture most of these wells that had been shown to have the highest incidence of PFOA, PFOS. And we also had identified 3 individual wells on the other side of the runway in the OJUN group that also had iDoses. But today, under the current testing that we've been doing, we now have to come up with a whole new solution, and we need to apply for a second grant. And so that will require that we identify all 3 choke points that will capture all 76 wells sources that feed the system right now. And that will cover 100% of all supply sources. Again, but that's going to take probably 2 to 3 years to get those second 4 duplex units. As you can see here on the right, the picture, that is a duplex 4 duplex that will be installed in 3 different locations. And hopefully that will do it. But we had to come up with an interim solution. And so working with EPA, we went ahead and we are procuring, as we speak, 10 duplex units from Calgon Carbon, as you saw the picture before. And we'll be installing those on 10 of the worst wells that we have showing the PFOS, PFOA in them. And so hopefully that will fix things, and we will hopefully have a quick turnaround on the initial EDA grant now that funding is coming our way. But in the meantime as well, we've also, through our Attorney General's office, have begun participating in a class action lawsuit associated with a goal that we're going to try and get reimbursement for most of our expenditures, and also some ongoing maintenance from the producers of the materials of PFOA, PFOS. That issue is still ongoing. Next slide, please. And to focus on the drought, for some reason, we did not have a problem this year. We did soundings in our monitoring wells and found that we only really lost about 1/3 of our capacity. And so we came through it surprisingly well, even though we did have a fairly dry summer. So we did well. Next slide. And my concluding slide, and I apologize for the length of time, we are still challenged by our finances. Again, that's going to be ongoing for several more months now, we know that. But we are still focused on maintaining that 80-hour work week, and that has been successful so far, and we hope it continues. The funding for maintenance, we've had to do a lot of workarounds because we actually don't have the cash to do some of the repairs appropriately. So again, that's been a challenge. And our vehicle replacements are, again, very limited, and that has challenged us in terms of how best to handle shifting our employees around to projects. We are also focused heavily on pressure management, and I applaud our water operations group and also our engineering group for the work that they've been doing to really focus on getting these ARVs and PRVs installed to help us control pressure so that we can do leak reduction, because that's what we've been finding is the biggest issue for us. And finally, that latest issue with regard to immigration services that has limited us to where our source of CWs and H-1Bs. This has been a real challenge because our primary source is not the mainland, as many of you know. It's from the Philippines and Taiwan and Vietnam. So it's too bad. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Well, Bill, thanks for that. That was great. There's one question I'd like to maybe hit on here. I think we're going to be all right on time, so I'm not too worried. It says here, if the 10 units bring the CUC wells below the PFAS detection limits non-detect, will you still proceed forward with the second large-scale GAC units?
Yes, we will. The reason being that we know that the system, well, we don't know what's going to happen. All we know is that one of our highest wells is well over 1,000 parts per trillion, well over. And so we know that the blending right now has been benefiting us with the other wells. And so we've been relying on that. But what we have to do is make sure that we can capture 100%, because I think our public expect us to do the right thing. And we're going to be doing that.
Bill, if I can, I've got just one quick question. If I might have missed it. Can you speak? I know one of the continuous challenges you've had up there, and particularly in Saipan, has been the 24-hour water supply. I know that you guys got a headway on that a few years ago. Can you speak a little bit to that on how that's going?
Yeah, ever since June of 2018, we have been 24/7, probably 95% of the time. We have had a couple situations where, as you know, a break in the main, or we may have been part of a drought period in one of those years. The water has not been adequate, and so we've had to schedule water for several weeks. But again, that's been minimal. We have been able, and so we've been focused heavily on replacing a lot of our worst asbestos concrete locations, neighborhoods, and we're starting to see real value in that. Also, with the level of leak detection that we've been doing, that has really helped quite a bit. And also now with this new effort on the PRVs to install them to reduce pressure imbalances, and also adding more VFDs at some of our well heads. And we're probably doing more, it's more planning right now, but it's on the plans to get that done. And also at our lift stations and our wastewater side. All those things are helping us to reduce our main breaks and things like that.
That's great. You know, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, that's, you know, we heard from Chuk and their challenges, and, you know, Saipan wasn't too long ago when that was a challenge up in Saipan. So that's a good story, and really glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So, Bill, thanks a lot for your update. I'm going to go ahead and cue Miguel Bordallo up next from the Guam Water Works Authority here in Guam. So if we can do maybe a mic check. Do we have a short snippet? Yeah, we have a little introduction for GWA, and then we'll turn it over to Miguel Bordallo. So again, Bill Gilmore, thanks so much for your update.
All right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to give you an update on what's been going on with GWA since the last conference. Can move to the next slide, and I'll just give you an overview of what I plan to discuss. We did want to go through the COVID-19 update and how it's been impacting GWA, as well as give you a snapshot of our capital improvement program and then upcoming GWA initiatives. I did not prepare anything for statistics, but I can give you a quick rundown for those unfamiliar with GWA. We have about 42,000 water customers and about 26,000 sewer customers. So a little over half of our water customers are connected to our wastewater system. We operate primarily from groundwater sources through 120 wells, about 100 of which are operating at any given time. Our distribution system runs the entire entire length of the island, but we do have a need to purchase water from the Navy for some of our southern villages. So we have a cooperative agreement there. And we are currently working towards implementation of our recently approved 5-year rate plan and capital improvement program. But before we get into that, I will just quickly give you an update on the COVID-19 impacts to GWA's operations. Next slide, please. So the primary focus when we first were hit with the pandemic was to make sure that our water and wastewater operations remained operating as normal. So all essential employees obviously were required to report to duty, but our customer service centers were shut down for a period to comply with the public health emergency that was declared by the governor. When our customer service centers did reopen, we implemented temperature screenings, high contact disinfection throughout the day for high contact surface areas. We implemented a greater emphasis on providing services online. Permitting for our projects remained in progress, but usually by appointment only for appointments with engineering and our permits personnel. We did emphasize our new online and mobile app platforms for customer service and payment. And we focused on providing the services that we could to our customers online, and where we couldn't, we set up alternative measures. We did not have customer service lobbies open in the very beginning, but we did open up a drive-through to allow our customers to come in and make payments on their accounts and so on and so forth. We also established a policy to suspend disconnections during the beginning of the pandemic, and that carried through until June of this year. Our board did authorize us to implement a COVID-19 relief program to provide extended payment terms for those customers who required a little more time to catch up on their bills. In terms of our workforce availability, we've been fortunate in that we've not had any direct impacts of COVID-19 with our staff. We've maintained, as of July, we had about a 96% workforce availability, which pretty much was common throughout even through the worst of the pandemic in March and early April. So we maintain that level of workforce availability throughout so far through August as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the impacts to our business, we have too seen a decline in visitor arrivals. So we have seen a dramatic decline in hotel consumption. However, we did see a shift in residential consumption. So as an example, for the year-to-date figures as of June, the hotel class is down 22% over 2019, with about 173,000 kgals less in consumption for the year. And the commercial 3, which also accounts for restaurants and businesses associated with the visitor industry, 17% decline in consumption over 2019. But if you look at the increase in our residential consumption, it's 202,000 kgals year to date over June year to date in fiscal year 19 levels. So it's up 8%, and it more than makes up for the losses that we have seen in demand in the hotel and commercial classes. So we're seeing that move from hotel consumption to residential consumption. However, we still see the revenue impact because our wastewater tariff is a flat rate for our residential customers, and it's volume-based for our commercial and hotel customers. So overall, the decline in revenues has been, we're projecting to be $5.8 million less than our fiscal year 2019 levels. Projecting forward for the coming year, we anticipate that we will see the levels that we're seeing in June, the demand patterns that we're seeing through June, continue into probably the first or second quarter of fiscal year 21, and then we're projecting a slow recovery to about 80% of pre-pandemic levels at the end of fiscal year 21. As a result of these declines in revenues, we implemented very early on a cost containment plan. We were in the process of going out into the bond market, so we were doing a lot of financial modeling and projections to support our bond issuance. So we took that opportunity to prepare a streamlined financial model to work in conjunction with our cost containment plan. And what that did was allowed us to, month over month, as we saw our demand numbers come in, adjust our projections looking forward, and then make adjustments to what our target levels were for cost containment. So immediately we eliminated certain expenses that were non-essential: travel, non-essential expenses, subscriptions. We targeted reductions in contractual expenses, specific vendors. We suspended all new hiring with the exception of critical operations positions that needed to be filled. We set on a program to try and reduce water purchases and our power consumption by making adjustments in our distribution system and production to put as many wells on standby as we could, while still maintaining adequate levels in our reservoirs to provide for service levels to our customers. The other thing we did for cost containment was to defer some of the preventive maintenance and revenue-funded capital improvement programs or projects. And so by doing so, we were able to keep our expenses down, and we track this on a monthly basis to make sure that our financial obligations with respect to our bond indenture and the agreements with the people who invest and purchase our bonds, that we were able to meet those, and we've been fortunate enough with this proactive management to make that happen. In terms of specific impacts to our capital improvement program, we did experience at the beginning of the pandemic, with the government shutdowns, certain delays with respect to permitting for some of our projects. When the government shut down, we weren't able to get our permits processed. So that had a minor impact for a small number of projects. But what we are seeing now potentially is that with the slowdown in the processing of H-2B visas for some of the projects that we are currently undertaking, the larger ones, that has been slowed down in part because of the conditions here, but also in part due to the suspension of services, for example, at the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines, which is required for the processing of their H-2B visas. So we anticipate there will be some latent effects to some of our projects because of those conditions. Next slide, please. So just to give you a status on some of our major projects in our capital improvement program, which have been completed since the last AWWA conference. The Agate Santa Rita wastewater treatment plant was a $56 million new secondary treatment facility. And I know that some folks from US EPA are on the line and may be viewing this. So I'm just going to point out that in pulling these slides together, the completion dates that I listed were based essentially on the contract documents and final invoices and certificates of substantial completion, and not necessarily when the systems came online or the new plant came online. So they should bear very little relation to our mandated deadlines. So Agate Santa Rita, we did complete finally in June of 2019. The picture on the left is an in progress construction photo. The picture on the right is the completed facility with all the paving and all the lipstick on the pig, so to speak. Next slide, please. In January of this year, we completed a $19 million treatment facility upgrade for the Umatic-Mariso wastewater treatment plant. This is a aerated lagoon, which you can see on the right. In the foreground of that picture, you can also see the UV disinfection building, which was added as part of this project. And then on the left, totally rehabilitated and refurbished overland flow system with the percolation beds and a new tank to provide for equalization. Next slide, please. Also completed in May of 2019 were the Jigo and Estumbo reservoir projects. These are 3 reservoirs with a price tag of 18 million. So I believe these are 2 mg tanks, and so average cost per tank I think is about 6 million. And that was completed as part of our court order requirements. Next slide, please. Most recently, we just completed a 9-mile rehabilitation using cured in place pipe of our Route 3, Route 9 sewer interceptor, which provides service to the military. This interceptor conveys wastewater from Anderson Air Force Base and will eventually pick up waste from the new Marine base, which is currently being constructed in northern Guam, and conveys those wastewater flows to our Northern District wastewater treatment plant, which you can see on the photo on the left. This is a $22.8 million project, which was completed under budget and ahead of schedule. You can see the CIP in the center photo. You can see the CIPP liner being installed. The photo on the bottom right shows the UV curing train, the light train that gets inserted into the inflated pipe liner. And then the photo on the top right provides a view of the bypass pumping system and surface mounted HDP bypass piping, all of which was turned over to GWA for its own use at the conclusion of the project. And then the 2 photos at the bottom show a CCTV view of the completed and lined pipe, as well as a refurbished manhole with the epoxy coating. So this was a landmark for us, completed entirely using grant funding from the Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment. And it was critical to the timing of the opening of the new Marine base. So we wanted to make sure that we did our best to complete this project on time. And with the help of our program manager, we've been able to do that. Next slide, please. In terms of projects that are in progress, we have several, the first couple focusing on the wastewater side. The photo you see here is our Route 1, Phase 1 sewer line rehabilitation. This is, again, CIPP and point repairs to sewer lines running from Assen to Adelup along Route 1 or Marine Corps Drive, for those of you who are familiar with it. This is a $6.7 million project, which is currently in progress and hopefully to be completed soon. We are currently working on trying to get bids for the Phase 2 of this project. Next slide, please. Also ongoing, sometimes to the frustration of several of the people that call me about their morning commutes, the Route 4 sewer line rehabilitation. This is a relief sewer line that was put into service or put in the ground many years ago, but we were not able to put into service because of excessive I&I. This project, once it's completed, will allow us to bring this sewer line into service and expand our capacity for wastewater flowing from the central portion of the island to our treatment plant in the Ganya. This is a $7.8 million project split between two different contractors working on CIPP and point repairs and some of the busiest traffic intersections on Guam. So that project is in progress, but soon to be completed. Next slide, please. This next project is kind of the biggest project we have going at the moment. I think it's, in terms of dollar amounts, it's the largest project that GWA has undertaken in its history. This is a $122 million secondary treatment upgrade to the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a very complex project. You can see in these two photos, this is currently ongoing, and these are very current photos. On the right, you can see the site of the existing plant. You can see the two primary clarifiers and the digesters that are there. You will notice on the bottom right-hand corner, there's an existing chlorine contact chamber that has been demolished. The effluent box is still there and is being bypassed into the outfall right now, but they're working on constructing the new UV disinfection system in that location. And then on the photo on the left, you can see the foundations of the new secondary clarifiers. There's 3 of them, and the oxidation ditches in the center of that photo. And out on the horizon, that's a very ballpark guess on my part of where the deep ocean outfall is, but at some point out there, there is a deep ocean outfall. And after this project concludes, or while it's being concluded, we will also be installing a new diffuser on that deep ocean outfall under a separate contract. That's the last remaining piece of this puzzle. And it's a pretty risky project, being that it's marine work on the water. We're hoping for good conditions, and we're hoping that that gets done in the springtime of next year. Next slide, please. We also have some water projects that are still ongoing. We're showing pictures for this project of the 3 reservoirs that are slated for replacement: Santa Rosa, Santa Rita, and Sanifa reservoirs. This, again, is another court-ordered project. We just recently received funding when we issued our Series 2020A bonds, $134 million in bonds, which we successfully sold on the markets in New York. We did receive the funding to complete this project along with the remaining court-ordered reservoir projects. This particular project is $26 million in value for these 3 tanks and some other off-site piping improvements. Next slide, please. We are also concurrently undertaking another reservoir project, the Tuma number 2, Chalet number 2, and Hyundai reservoirs. Some of these are very close to completion. This was a $21 million reservoir replacement project, and it adds a second tank to our Chalet location and puts into service a reservoir that has been existing but not really functioning correctly within our distribution system. That's a Tuma number 2 tank. So these are currently in construction and slated to wrap up very soon. Next slide, please. So in late February of this year, we did receive approval from the Public Utilities Commission on Guam for our 5-year financial plan and capital improvement program. And that 5-year capital improvement program is a total of $342 million in CIP upgrades, with about 51% of that, or $173 million, being allocated for water projects, to include the remaining court order projects that GWA has to undertake in order to meet federal district court order. 38% of that amount, or about $131 million, is allocated for wastewater collection system projects that we view as upcoming regulatory priorities based on our ongoing discussions with US EPA. About 5% of our CIP, or 15 million, is slated for us to continue progress on our SCADA implementation program. And then the remaining 6%, or about 21 million, are for miscellaneous facility upgrades. So we do have quite an ambitious 5-year CIP in front of us. Out of that 5 years, I think we're looking at a little over 100 million to be spent in fiscal year 20, and that includes the work on the Northern District wastewater treatment plant. In addition to our first year's expenditures, on average, the remaining years within that 5-year plan call for a spend rate of about $60 million a year in capital improvement projects. And we talk about the visitor industry being a critical component of our economy, but the work that comes out of our capital improvement program is, I feel, equally important to making sure that we sustain economic activity on Guam, especially in light of the pandemic. So we're doing our best to make sure all of our projects move forward to the benefit of all the different contractors and suppliers and vendors that participate in these projects. And so hopefully that assists with stimulating the economy on Guam. Next slide, please. Some of our upcoming initiatives, we also, as every utility before us that has presented, Kemble and Mr. Gilmore, we have a problem with non-revenue water. It has been a perennial problem for GWA, and in recent years, we've taken a more holistic approach to trying to address this, and we've developed a water loss control program that we're currently trying to implement, which includes district metered areas. We recently completed a pilot study for 3 distinct areas within our distribution system, in which we applied a district metered area concept to monitor what comes in and what goes out, and coupled that with leak detection and repair. And on that basis, we were able to see some encouraging results of averaging about 45% reduction in losses within, on average, across those 3 neighborhoods that we applied this concept to. And so those results were very encouraging. And so our current efforts involve expanding that into an island-wide plan for district metered areas. We're working that in conjunction with our pressure zone realignment project, which seeks to provide the appropriate pressures within our over 40 pressure zones across our distribution system. We are also undertaking at the current time production meter upgrades to improve the accuracy of our water audit results. Kind of related to that, we've recently gone through a very painful meter replacement program for our customer demand meters, which over the last couple of years have been responsible for a depressed or artificially suppressed volume of demand, which drives our water loss rate higher than it really should be. So with the completion of that project and replacing our residential meters and our production meter upgrades, we hope to tighten up the numbers in our water audit so that we can more effectively manage our water loss control program. The other thing, when the PUC approved our rate plan, they made it a point to make sure that we prioritized and moved up in our CIP pipe replacement projects that would have a beneficial impact in reducing our non-revenue water. So those changes were incorporated into the 5-year CIP that was approved in February of 2020. Next slide, please. We also are undertaking a septic tank elimination program, as I mentioned at the beginning with the description of our system. Just a little more than half of our water customers are also on our wastewater collection system. So we will be undertaking a improvement of our program to eliminate septic tanks and get more people onto the wastewater collection system for various reasons, including aquifer protection, wellhead protection, but will also have the ancillary benefit of being revenue enhancing for the authority. As part of that program, we are looking to enhance the enforcement abilities through collaboration with Guam EPA and undertaking a little bit more enforcement on our own with our program in order to get people that are close enough to existing sewers to connect. Especially, we're going to prioritize areas where we have wellheads in those areas. We're also seeking to bolster our existing revolving fund loan program. We want to increase the amount available for loans to consumers to facilitate the work that is required to get them off of the septic system and provide a piped connection to our wastewater collection system. Next slide, please. I didn't prepare anything with regard to any progress or updates for PFOS or PFOA, but briefly, I would like to state that we do have treatment systems in place for the wells that have tested positive for the presence of PFOS and PFOA. We continue to operate those treatment systems. We have sufficient inventory of the GAC in order to do replacements when required. We are working actually on that now for a couple of sites. 2 of our impacted well sites do remain offline, but we have design plans for a treatment system which are nearing completion and will be out to bid shortly. And then once those systems are constructed, we will be bringing those 2 wells back online. So just again, want to thank you for the opportunity to update you. I sometimes, running this utility, certainly feel like the child depicted in this picture where someone's shooting a fire hose stream at me and we just try to handle it as best we can. And I am fortunate that we have a very good engineering and operations staff that provide the support that I need in order to keep this utility going. And so with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions if there might be.
Miguel, thank you very much. That was a very, very, very thorough presentation. There was one question, but you answered it right on the next slide. So I think you queued that up very nice. You know, I have one quick question, and then we'll move over to our next island. And it's you know, with tourism industry down and loading coming off of our tourist districts in Tumon down, has GWA taken that as an opportunity to sort of do some PM or some sort of cleaning? You know, now the sewer levels are low. Have you seen that as an opportunity there?
We see that as a potential opportunity. I think we've not taken advantage of it as of yet, and in part that has to do with the fact that we are similarly in a tight financial situation, and the instructions to our AGM of Ops has been to try and control as much as possible the expenses in order for us to balance the decline in revenues with our expenses. So while there is that opportunity, unfortunately, the effort to do it might be a bit more expensive than we can afford at this time.
Sure, sure. Well, okay. Well, thank you very much again, and we'll keep moving along. I'm going to acknowledge that we're going to go a little bit over on time, but I want to encourage everyone to stick around. We'll definitely get you all out of here before lunch. Before moving on, so we have the folks from Palau, but I want to confirm if they're online or not. Can I get a text or a mic check to see if anyone from Palau is still available to present for us? Are we hearing anything? Okay, what I'd like to do then is I'm going to go ahead and move ahead in our program here to Pohnpei. And if we can queue up Pohnpei, we have Lirensen Arens. I'm sure I butchered that and I'm sorry. But we have a short little snippet for the island of Pohnpei, and then we'll open your mic up for your update. Thank you. Do we have our, oh, there you are. All right, great to see you. Can we do a quick mic check?
Hello.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay.
So go ahead, the stage is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Greetings from Bombay. Before that, on behalf of our CEO, is not with us. I would like to introduce myself and my colleague here. My name is Liren Irons. I am the manager for Waterworks. And my colleague here is Bradley Henry. He's the manager for wastewater. So on behalf of our CEO, we will be doing our presentation for PUC. And since Bombay, it's already lunchtime, in projection that we will be up to that time for lunch and for the full overview of our corporation. Please, everyone, you can always refer to 2018 and 2019 presentation. So we'll try to cut it short as much as possible. Thank you. Let's get to the next slide. This is just a brief roles and responsibility of our corporation. We have the utility comprises of power, water, and wastewater, and we have 7 board members elected by the governor and appointed by the legislator, state legislator, and the chair manager is the one that the board hired the chair manager. Next slide. This is the water division. Pretty much, I'll go general on this. If you look at the previous slide that we did last year and before that, every detail of the system, Bombay system, is in there. The water division here is this is the whole island of Bombay. It's about 70% that we have the system on island, the service area, and we have the central system, the colonial area, the urban area, and Palagar, where's the capital, and we have Lukop water system and Wapar. Both the system are, the central system contains surface water and groundwater. The rest are solely on groundwater. Next slide. As mentioned, that's the service area or proposed, and also the proposed expansion plan that we provided for your information. We got about the system, we have 5 municipalities, and we pretty much have the system in Colonia, the whole Colonia, Soges, Nech, U, and portion of Metalini. Next slide. I think this is pretty much the thing that we want to go a bit detail on the current issue, challenges, and reasons. I think in Bombay, it's similar to the rest of our neighboring islands. We have lots and a bunch of water issues. But out of those, these are some of the challenges that we felt that we want to share. In general, the challenges that we're facing in Bombay is the water quality and quantity in general, and the caps on water revenue. The reasons are basically the system is old, from the treatment plant down to the distribution network. One of the issues that contribute to the quality is the upland activities, the deforestation, it increase in the demand and expansion of the network. These are some of the general concept on the both the quality and quantity. And the inconsistence of collection effort, increase of water areas. So these are pretty much the challenges and the reasons. Next slide. Development, pretty much based on those, these are some of the development. We break it down to like the project. When we say project, it's more like on the CIP. And then of course, the operation. This is specifically on the water. The projects that we're facing today is currently, we have an approved funds to purchase drill rig. We want to upgrade some of our, not only upgrade, but to develop some of our aquifers around the island. We have a funds approved this is to support in one of our treatment plan. This treatment plan is basically treat the groundwater, and the issue that we're facing now on this new, for this treatment plan is we receive lots of, we're pumping, and we're actually extracting a lot of iron, basically manganese. So with due respect with our government in collaboration with the Israel government, where the Israel government is trying to help us to assist us on the installation of this plant. And we're hoping on this once this COVID-19 is ended, they will be able to get this project on. And of course, we have an horizontal water project ongoing now. It's about 8 million. This is under the compact. It's going through the northeast side of Bombay, and hoping by sometimes next year, they will finish the project. On the operations side, some of the development that we're doing, this is based on if you look at the previous slide, we incorporated this implementation of cash water meter. This is basically the prepaid meter. This is to kind of uplift our revenue. Because if in detail, if you look at our in terms of our collection effort, it's we have lots of arrears. So we're thinking that this concept will definitely help us in terms of collection. And the second one is the conventional meter audit. These are some of the things why we incorporate this concept is that this is basically on the non-revenue water. We cut meters. When we do our non-revenue water, when we do the tabulation, and this is one of the factor that that contribute to the non-revenue water. So basically today we're employing this meter audit to look at all the conventional meter on the problems. Next slide. So this is it's going to be on the wastewater division. The challenge is I'll pretty soon I'll have Mr. Bradley to present on this, but just to touch on the COVID-19, the challenges we're facing. PUC is in general, PUC is also with the UNICEF and with the government and some of the private sector. We're actually assisting UNICEF on hand washing. We're deploying all these the buckets, and we're actually come up with some design on pipings, putting water in for especially the areas that they're not access to the PUC grid on the water. So these are some of the things that we're helping on the government. And in terms of the collection or the revenue, there's a slight change in terms of our revenue. There's about 20% decline in collection, because based on when our governor issued out the declaration, we stopped doing all the disconnection. So the latest audit on our revenue, we calculated about 20% that we're losing. For that, I would like to turn this to my colleague, Mr. Bradley, to conclude our presentation for today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've been reading the slides for too long, so you already understand. PUC just upgraded our wastewater treatment plant, and the average dry water flow is like 1.6 million gallons per day. The plant is fully operational and daily average of 1.06 million gallons per day. And effluent qualities are well within the relevant guidelines by our EPA. Next slide. Okay. We have the challenge that we're meeting at the moment is on the collection network. The collection network was put together late or early 1970s, and at this time it's showing deterioration and we've been getting a lot of infiltration during heavy rainfalls. And if you see the graph, it's kind of, and with this new upgrade, we also face challenges of skill sets. Our new wastewater treatment plant come with all of this high technology, and so it's like something new. So that's, I put in as a new challenge for us, is to develop the skill set, hoping to be able to maintain and operate and keep this thing running longer than. And the third one on the slide is, PUC have proposed a tariff for wastewater, but so far it hasn't been implemented. So the wastewater division is almost a burden to our water and our electricity department for budgets. Next slide. As for the COVID-19, I would say we are fortunate that COVID-19 hasn't arrived on the island, but it has impacted on how we do things. Although state government has their own COVID-19 task force, PUC has put together its own task force, which include myself and Lirensan as members. And we have put together a couple of safety measures to implement when COVID-19 arrives on the island. And personal hygiene and use of PPE has become a major issue with us, like cleaning services and all of this other stuff. And basically, for wastewater, we're still soliciting support from our sister utilities around, or all of us, to, how do I say this? Because like there are conflicting reports on how you would get COVID-19 from wastewater, and we're soliciting support, like lesson learned from other utilities, to help us cope with this thing if it's happened to arrive on the island. And at the wastewater treatment plant, we have only 7 employees that run the operation and maintenance and stuff, and I cannot afford to lose any of them. So next slide. Oh, so with this thing said, I thank you everybody for giving us the time to share what we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was wonderful. Guys, there's we got a few questions that came. If you don't mind, can you field a couple of questions for our audience here?
Yeah. We like to answer the questions from Yochi. Who said, Yochi, do you also have trout? Well, we do, but it's not really impacting the main island. Only on the small islands, the outer islands. I think we were blessed and we were fortunate. We were able to cope with this. From the CEO from Chu, in terms of, okay, let me explain this. The governor doesn't declare in terms of disconnecting the water. It's something that we took the initiative of this to a kind of a trial that we incorporate into our planning process. We stopped disconnecting the customer for 2 months, and we want to know if this COVID-19 affect us or arrive on our shore, these are some of the things that we need to establish a trial or a lesson learned. So within the 2 months, this is what we, not disconnecting the customer, especially those that with the high areas. This is what we have. We were down to 20% loss. So these are some of the things that even us, the corporation, we want to learn also if any pandemic or epidemic hit us. So I hope this will help. I mean, it answer some of the question. But to assure everyone, it's not in the declaration from the governor. Thank you.
Okay, guys, is there anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap this up, Pompey?
Well, yes, I do have. I was wondering if US EPA is with us because I felt that there's they have a big. I mean, in terms of on the water quality that we need to hear, because this is something that the utility in the FSM needs to confront the US EPA Region 9 to at least give us a chance, especially the utility, especially on the water quality, because this is something that is also in our milestones or in our planning that we want to resurrect the concept of water quality or laboratory. That's the only thing I want to share.
I'm very glad you brought that up. Actually, in my discussions with Kempo over in Chuk, he's brought something up very similar to that. And we do have folks from EPA on the line. I don't know if they were prepared to really engage us. If they are, any of you guys from US EPA are online are willing to say a few words, I can open the floor up for you. Maybe you can just shoot a quick chat there. We'll see. But Liren and Kempo and if there's anyone else, this is a great forum for us to share these ideas and intentions, and we'd like to keep that going. So what I'll do is I'm going to jump into the closing remarks, and then that'll take me just a few minutes. And if we hear back from any of our counterparts or the regulatory folks from US EPA that they'd like to say a few words to your question, Liren, we'll open the stage and let them chime in. Okay. And so go ahead, and we're a little bit over schedule, but that's okay. I know I didn't acknowledge that it's lunchtime already over there in Pohnpei and Duke, but so sorry about that. You could turn your screen off and have your lunch while we close out.
Yeah. No problem.
Again, thank you, everybody. I just want to kind of close this out for all of us by a few acknowledgments. I want to acknowledge one of our sort of founding members here, Paul Kemp. He was acknowledged nationally, actually, by the National AWWA as a lifetime member. So if we can put the spotlight on Paul Kemp for getting that lifetime membership award, and also just thank you from all of us for helping found our AWWA subsection. So there he is. There's Paul. So Paul, you want to say a few words for us?
I think maybe receiving of this award might give you all some kind of an idea of how much I value AWWA. Once I got in, I couldn't help it but just get as involved as I could. And it has always been very rewarding, and the results have always been very satisfying.
Well, you're getting lots of congratulations, and that's a testament to your commitment, Paul. So great, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, just a few other things. I want to thank our AWWA Planning Committee and board members for putting this on. In addition, a key member why this is running so smoothly is through the Global Learning and Engagement Center at the University of Guam. We reached out to them, and they're doing a fantastic job. So thank you to them for that. This workshop was this micro. What are we calling it? Our micro conference was brought to you for free, and it's worth every penny of that. But we do want to ask that, and you're going to see a link here put down there for a scholarship for a dear friend of ours who passed away last year, Dr. Rausch from the University of Guam's Weary You know, was very instrumental. He went out to many of the islands for training, for awareness, did a lot of work in wastewater, and he passed away, unfortunately, very suddenly. We lost him too soon. And so his colleagues set up a scholarship fund for him, and I don't know if John Jensen is on the line. I may let him say a few words if he's here. But there's a scholarship. There's an intent. We're trying to raise $25,000 to seed this scholarship, which will fund a graduate student or a student in the field to go to certain workshops and participate in professional development. It'll provide a revolving funding source for a student in our field, water, wastewater, and engineering. So I believe we're still short. I think they're in the order of about $10,000, $8,000 short. So they're pretty close. So if you guys can take a look at that link and go over to the UOG Endowment Foundation. It was also linked when you registered. So again, we really appreciate it. You can offer what you can. I know these are tough times. Oh, it's on the chat. Yeah, we linked on the chat. I know these are tough times, but every little bit can help for our industry. So please try to donate what you can there. Oh, Dr. Jensen, can you say just a few words, if you will, about your late colleague, Dr. Rausch?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, well, Ken said it very well. We all knew and valued our professional and personal relationships with Joe, and he did a lot, and we really want to preserve his legacy, particularly his commitment to high standards of professional performance and integrity and the mentoring he did for his students. Yeah, we've got about 18,000 going on 19,000 raised. We need 25,000 in order to be able to put out an award of $1,000 each year. And we're hoping to be able to make that first award this next year. It'd be nice to do it concurrently with the graduation of the first class of engineering students. Joe contributed both to the new School of Engineering, of course, as well as to Weary. So his legacy runs pretty broad. So appreciate the support we've got so far, and be grateful for whatever help everybody can give us meeting the goal here in the next few months. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. So yeah, we're pretty close, but we're not quite there yet. So if you can reach over to that link or go to the Endowment Foundation at University of Guam, you can find ways to support that. With that said, I want to close out here. This format is probably going to be carried on through the future. We definitely want to do the face-to-face conference that we've had in the past years. That's not off the books yet, but we see this as opportunity for training. A lot of good things came out. Water loss is certainly a common ground that we all have, improving our skill sets, and water quality. And so you look out for that in the future. And with that said, I want to just, before we close out here, you're going to get a poll to answer, and we want to do a group photo. So you're going to be queued up for the poll and the group photo. For the group photo, you obviously got to, put your camera on, and it's going to be sort of a screenshot group photo. So comb your hair and brush your teeth. There's the poll. So I'm going to go ahead and go off, turn it over to our mediator here. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone who presented. Again, be safe and stay well. So please take care of that poll and stay online. Turn your cameras on, and we'll get that screenshot done. Can we turn them all on automatically?
Off a day, everyone. So we'll just be assisting everyone with turning their videos. We'll be sending you a little nudge. We'll also be putting up the poll question that was placed before the conference started in case you weren't able to complete the poll. Right now for the current poll, we're looking at a 91% voting rate. So we'll just leave it open for a couple more seconds. And then after that, we'll open the pre-conference poll again, just so you're able to participate if you missed it earlier. Hi, everyone. Once again, we're just going to be putting our videos on so we can take our customary conference photo. We're also redoing the pre-poll or the pre-conference poll from earlier at the start of the conference. Right now, we're at a 50% voting rate at this time. Once we get to 100 or at least close to there, we'll go ahead and end the poll and we'll take the picture. But we ask that you please turn on your video at this time. Thank you. Hi, everyone. We have about 26 non-video participants. If you haven't turned on your video already or haven't received the notification from us, we ask that you please turn your video on. We'll be taking 25 photos at a time, so 25 individuals per shot. So the way it will work is I'll count 1, 2, 3, and everybody can smile or pose. And we'll be taking a series of 3 photos, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and start. Our pre-poll, our pre-conference poll is about to close, so we'll give you a couple more seconds. And thank you everyone for joining us again and for being a part of the first virtual micro conference. Okay, so once again, we're gonna take 3 separate photos. I'm gonna count to 3, and on the third, if you could hold your smile for a couple of seconds, okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're gonna do another one. Okay. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, last one. Okay, we're gonna do one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for our conference. Just as a quick reminder, CEUs are available for this virtual micro conference. We will be sending you an email today with information of how to register and avail of these CEUs. We will also be sending out a survey, a brief anonymous survey for you all to complete. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for our first AWWA-HIWPS virtual micro conference. And we hope you have a great lunch and a great Friday and great weekend. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. She said it's going to be mailed out.